Hi, ChiChi. How are you?
Hey, thanks for having me, Jennifer.
Oh my God. I'm so grateful that you're here. For the listener, who are you today in the space?
My name is ChiChi Anyanwu. I am a talent manager and I am based in New York City. I am a new time business owner. I launched my company at the start of COVID, so it's been about 2 years and some months. So my company is still fairly new, but before then I worked at a small boutique talent management company that mainly represented directors, writers, and a few actors, not a lot, but it mainly represented talent from behind the scenes. So I will say it was definitely a good stepping stone in terms of me learning how the business works and making contacts. But I will say when I did start my company, I solely am focused on acting talent for theater, television, and film. Outside of talent management, I also do some teaching. Just taught today. I'm teaching at the New School in a entrepreneurship class, and then I'm also teaching at Stonestreet Studios, and it's kind of like a guest teacher doing scene study classes for them. And then also in my spare time, I also do some audience consultant work. So I'm working on a show called Death of a Salesman. So I'm doing some audience work for them. We have some community nights coming up in September. And I post codes all over like social media and Facebook, and have an email newsletter blast as well when I send like affordable tickets to shows. And it's usually shows that are written by Black playwrights, because I am trying to promote diversity for off-Broadway and also Broadway shows. Yeah.
I must say, social media has its pros and cons, and I imagine we can talk more about that too. But your social, I'm just going to like plug it for anybody who doesn't follow it. Your social is so helpful and resourceful. You really do. It's not just like lip service of you literally are giving tools and resources all the time. And as an artist and actor myself, I'm always like, what is ChiChi saying? And what like, but like in the best way. And it doesn't feel like lecturing. It's just like as an asset and like, here, this is what's happening. Did you know? And just, so I just want to thank you for that, because it really actually is very helpful. And also just the way in which, for me, I want to be a part of this community that feels like lifting each other up in a way that is genuinely supportive. It's also really cool to hear how many hats you wear.
Yeah, and I do a little bit of everything, basically.
Truly the most. Well, I want to know a little bit more about what made you get into this part of the industry to begin with, and maybe just like a little bit about who you are as a human before you even get into the field.
Yeah, so I got my start doing casting. My first job out of school was working as a casting intern for Laura Stanzik, who did a lot of Broadway musicals, but she also was a resident casting director at that time for the McCarter Theater. So that was literally my first job out of school. I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do, honestly. I didn't know if I wanted to be a stage manager or work in publicity, but I knew I wanted to do something entertainment. So I actually applied everywhere. I researched all the top companies across the country. I applied at fellowships for the Goodman, for Steppenwolf, Philadelphia Theater Company, Walnut Street Theater, and I got called back for a few places, but I would say McCarter was the first place to offer me a casting internship. And the beautiful thing about McCarter, I don't know if they still do it today, they actually house all the interns. So I was sharing like a 4-bedroom home in Princeton, New Jersey, and we lived there for about 10 months. They paid for our housing and paid us a modest stipend, but we also had opportunities to also like work behind the scenes to make extra money. I did some house managing for them. I also ushered. I worked as a bartender. I worked in the company store. So I will say, even though I was an intern, it actually really gave me another level of respect for all the people who bring theater together, because there's just so many different hats in a theater. It's not only about the actors or the directors, but it's a whole house team that's also like making sure that like patrons are happy before they even get to see the show. So it just made me just respect what everyone does in the theater, And even when I was doing casting, when I moved to New York, I wasn't sure if casting was quite what I wanted to do, but I kind of fell into it because I knew that I had a passion for nurturing and developing talent. So I was like, I wasn't sure if, okay, maybe it's casting, because I love working with the actors and I love giving people, feedback. And also I've kind of always been someone who's shared resources. Even when I was in college, when people needed to find information about auditions, I would send auditions to my friends. And even with events, like I like to also like plan events, So I just wasn't quite sure how to like make that into a career. And it wasn't until I think it was I had a few friends who had gotten jobs because I had like recommended them for some jobs, and I thought about, I have people who I'm already giving jobs to, but I'm not making off of it. I'm not making money off of this. I'm giving my friends jobs and I'm not making any money. I was like, let me figure out what that is when you're getting people jobs.
Yeah.
That. So I kind of fell into working as an agent assistant because I have a few friends who referred me to their agents because I literally was like helping them get jobs, and they already had agents. So I was helping them get jobs, and they already had agencies. So I got an assistant job that was referred to at a smaller boutique agency. But the only thing is, I will say when I was at the agency, I did like it, but it felt a bit overwhelming because my boss had so many clients, you know? So I thought about, oh, you know what? I liked talking to the managers over the phone. I felt like the managers were very chill. It seemed like a lot of the managers had like a smaller roster. And I felt like for my personality and, you know, since I was really about kind of taking the time to get to like know my clients, and I also always had a passion for like branding and like marketing, I thought that management was going to be kind of more for my speed in terms of like keeping it like more smaller and more about kind of like the long-term career goals as opposed to like kind of like the quick money gigs. So I kind of, you know, transitioned to management probably a few years after working as like an agency assistant. And I kind of stuck with management. I felt that I was, you know, kind of found my calling, but also just, you know, a job that I also felt like I was really good at. Because I also tried to see a lot. I would go to a lot of shows. I would go to a lot of showcases, and I would also like recruit people as well. And I started off having about 3 clients that my boss had given me when I got promoted. And one of the clients actually landed a series regular, and he worked with us for almost like 1 year. And he got a series regular, you know. So that was like my like, you know, sign that, oh, I know what I'm doing. I'm doing something right. I got someone who had barely any experience, a series regular, after only having like one on-camera credit, you know?
Wow.
So that was kind of like my first taste of like success and like, oh, I could actually do this, as opposed to like, you know, thinking if I should, you know, go to other areas. Because, you know, at the end of the day, unfortunately, when you're doing management, it doesn't necessarily pay as much as you would like it to until your clients are actually really making money and they're consistently booking. It just takes time to really make a substantial income from management.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so fascinating to hear you migrate between all these things because, and we've had different people on this podcast already talk about this, like in our Danny Barlow episode, we talk about theater management and just how no one really, like, it's a huge part of the infrastructure of this industry, the back end, the behind the scenes and how it all functions. But no, there isn't really the education for people to be like, oh, let's try this in my university space, or let's try this as I grow up to have an internship until you're like, wait, I'm really good at this part of the thing. Where do I go? And it seems like you were so intentional about this is what feels good. How can I continue seeking out the spaces that allow me to foster that within myself? And I would imagine the casting position, the internship, the assistant job, like all of this informs the way that you now are a manager. Like I think having all of those, I would imagine having all those hats prior is only strengthening the fact that while you're in this particular position, you're like, oh, I've known and seen all of these other spaces.
Exactly.
Also.
Yeah. I feel like they all kind of help each other. Like even when I'm working in my audience consultant work, I'm coming in contact with producers and directors and all these people that I'm meeting, that it's really also just helping my company be known and also helping my clients get work because I'm meeting Broadway producers who's like, oh, let me take a look at your company's website and take a look at your clients, you know? So everything kind of goes hand in hand, you know? And even the contacts that I made at the McCarter Theater, like almost like 12, 13 years ago, are folks who are like either hiring my clients or collaborating with my clients now. And you just never know. Like even a small internship. I did a small internship in New York for a casting company, and like that same casting director like hired 3 of my clients on a new television show that he's working on. So like you just never know. You never know with the contacts that you just make over the years how it's gonna help your career, you know?
Yeah. I love that. Well, let's break it down for somebody who's listening, because I think there's a little bit of a misunderstanding of a manager's responsibility versus, say, an agent's responsibility, or when you have both in conjunction with each other and how that partnership works. Let's kind of talk about that land for a little bit.
Yeah, so we do a little bit of everything, honestly. I feel like back in the day, like the manager's sole job was to advise and guide, and we weren't allowed to negotiate contracts. We were allowed to find actors work. But now the line is kind of blurred, you know, and also technically agents are mandated by the union. So like they have to be licensed. They can't take more than 10%. They also are negotiating contracts. So managers, in a way, they can actually they change their percentages. Some managers make 15%, some managers make 20% because we're not really mandated by the union. We don't have to get licensed as managers. So the only thing is kind of like you do have to make sure that you also do more of that research before you even bring on a manager because I do think that we do a lot of what the agent does, but we also kind of help with more like the developmental work and like the career branding. And, even when I talk to my clients, it's really about like, what are your short-term goals? What are your long-term goals? And really like taking the time to make sure that they're like moving in the right direction. Because sometimes I do collaborate with agents, and the agents are more so, they just want to make money. Like, for instance, I have a client who 35 years old, and his agent was submitting him for like an 18-year-old. And like my client also isn't right for that. He's 35 years old. He also doesn't sing, but because he's a certain ethnic group, let's submit him. But like, he's not actually right for that. That's also not his goal to do musical theater. Like, he's never done musical theater before, right?
Yeah.
So it's also about being as specific what the client's goals are and making sure that like we're focusing on projects that are going to help them meet their goal. Like if they're trying to be a series regular tomorrow, tour is not going to help them. Yeah. So even just having another voice that can also help to advocate for the client. Because I will say there are some, I don't know, for whatever reason, I think some actors are just nervous in terms of turning down auditions, or, they don't want to ruffle any feathers. So I think even with having a manager, it also helps to like, empower the client, also have another person kind of fight for you when you're like too nervous to kind of stand up to your agent. Sometimes we also do have to be the liaison between you and your agent sometimes, and making sure that we're on the same page. I have one good friend who I'm working with, and, in the back of my mind, I'm like, he doesn't actually really need me. Like, he's super successful. He's been on Broadway, been a series regular, but he really wanted me on because he trusts me. He trusts that, someone else is going to have his back and not have it only be about like the numbers. Like, he really wants someone who's like helping him pick the right projects and like, making sure that he's involved with things that are going to like continue to grow his kind of been successul already, and this is something as small as, once you even negotiate the contract, it doesn't really stop at the negotiations done. Like, oh, where is he staying at? We talk about hospitality, if the contract's going to include a car, because sometimes there's like little extra like hospitality touches that I'm always thinking about, because it's also about like, we want to make sure that our client's comfortable, as opposed to it just being about the numbers, right? So I'm also about like, oh, if he's working at 12-hour shoot, is he going to want to wait for an Uber, or is he going to want a car at night? You know what I mean? So just like the little touches, I think that a lot of managers are focused on in terms of like really being that advocate for the client.
Yeah. Do you find that there are certain, I don't mean necessarily like the names of agents, but certain types of agents that you vibe with more in a partnership in terms of the style of communication that you have with them?
I like working in a team. Like, because I'm a new company, like I much prefer most of my clients to have agents. Why? Because I'm still growing. I'm still developing as a new business leader, and I do have a lot more on my plate than when I was working at someone else's management company. Like, I'm now also overseeing the business and making sure that my bookkeeper is doing things in order. And like, there's so many things that I'm also coordinating as a business leader, as opposed to just pitching my clients and getting them in the door. So I like when folks have like agents who are also working just as hard as I am. Because I do think, back in the day, since, we weren't even allowed to like get auditions for appointments, I do want agents who can really like do the work as well in terms of getting clients into good rooms, or getting them into spaces that maybe like, let's say I don't have a contact at this top, casting company. I'm expecting the agent to kind of like pull the weight and also like follow through on projects, because sometimes I do feel like, we do, not saying we do work harder, but sometimes it feels like we're working longer hours, And this is something as small as like, we had a client that needed to change his room in an apartment, because I guess there was like a loud subway noise, and like even just kind of being on the phone with company management and kind of like working around the clock. Sometimes there's some agents who kind of just like punch out at 6 o'clock and they're good, so managers, we're kind of always kind of there to kind of troubleshoot. And even now I'm trying to learn boundaries, because it is harder in terms of like, we're not gonna say no to our client. If they need help with something, I'm gonna make that call at 11 o'clock at night. But I do feel like sometimes we are kind of like doing kind of almost above and beyond what we're called to do to kind of help support the client.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about clients. Let's talk about if you had to pick an ideal client, like what exactly is that for you communication wise? How did they reach out? How are you talking on the daily or weekly or monthly? What is that for you in an ideal world? If you're like, this is the embodiment of how I love to work with my clients.
I just like strong communication. I think there's a lot of folks are just doing a lot of like, it's almost like, I don't want to use the word trauma, but it's almost like because they had bad experiences with like their previous reps, it's like they're a bit kind of just strange communication wise in terms of, not actually being honest in terms of how they feel, or being nervous about turning down certain auditions. And, you know, people have told me that like in the past they'd had reps that like yelled at them or cursed at them or like really bullied them into like taking certain auditions. But, you know, I want my clients to feel comfortable. I never want them to feel like they're going to let me down because they can't do this audition. Like one client's like, yeah, I'm not really feeling well. I'm sick, but I'm going to do this audition. I'm like, hey, do you just want me to call casting and get an extension? Take care of yourself. Let me get an extension. Don't like try to hurt yourself because you're trying to get in this audition. Let's just get you an extension, you know? So I never want to feel like people are like on pins and needles because they're nervous about, you know, asking me a question about something. You know, I try to make sure that I'm as approachable and accessible as possible because I never want it to be, you know, in a situation that you don't feel comfortable talking to me. You know, I do feel like with any relationship, it's almost like you're dating, like you're getting to know each other. You're getting to feel if we're the right fit, because it, you know, I do see a lot of talent out there, a lot of talented people, but sometimes people are just not the right fit. It could be a personality thing. It could be energy. Like I had a few clients that unfortunately I had to let go because like the personalities that they just didn't gel with mine. You know, I'm pretty easygoing. I'm very much just kind of about the work. You know, there are some personalities that are kind of a bit over the top or a bit demanding, you know what I mean? Or just like the energy is just off, you know? And I feel like if the energy is off, like I don't know if I can even trust you on set because your energy is off with me. So are you gonna be okay on set? You know, so I get nervous about certain clients who are just very temperamental, like loose cannons, you know? So I also try to work with people who are also like, you know, not saying you have to be like, you know, I don't know, always easygoing. Like I don't, you know, you can definitely always ask for what you need. But at the same point, it's also like people who are also realistic about the goals, realistic about what also can be offered. Because I think sometimes people, you know, have a bad habit of comparing themselves to their friends. You know, I had one client that asked me about like, how come he didn't get an appointment for our projects? Because his friend got an appointment at similar time. Like, actually, your friend looks like he's like 20 years old and you're like mid to late 30s. Like, I don't understand how you're comparing yourself to your friends. So I also want people who also have a good sense of who they are, their branding, their type. Like I always try to have these conversations in the beginning so we're on the same page. But there's this thing about people always kind of comparing other people's journey. But, you know, everyone literally is different. Even if you think you're the quote unquote type, your essence is completely different, right? Some people bring off a certain kind of maturity that's like, you might not be able to play 20s anymore, unfortunately, when you're about 36, because you just give off a more mature energy, you know? So there's folks who are flexible with that. Like I have a few clients who are just like, they're kind of in that cusp between like late 20s, early 30s, but they're just down for whatever, you know, as long as they kind of, you know, if they need to be like clean shaven, they'll be clean shaven. If they need to look like they're a little bit mature, they're just so flexible. So I tend to work well with folks who are flexible as opposed to kind of trying to like put limits on themselves or not quite sure in terms of like who they are as an actor. So yeah, I need people who are just a little bit easier to work with that, you know, has a good understanding in terms of how the industry is, you know?
There's, I don't remember whose phrase this is or whatever, but I feel like over the past couple of years, especially with COVID, I've really tried to lead into this, which is the idea that you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And it's like, this isn't saying the people you like, this isn't saying the people you vibe with. It's like, if you spend 5 hours a day commuting on a bus and there's like a terrible person sitting next to you, you've just spent 5 hours of your energy with this energy next to you. And then that becomes part of your energy for that day. If you have a coworker that you have to sit next to, you know? And so this idea of if one is able to, in any way that is in their control, like take ownership of the types of people and frankly, energy you surround yourself with, then you're only going to be able to support those people that you want to give your energy towards in the best way that you possibly can. And I feel like there's something really beautiful to be said about there is no bad energy. It's just there's the energies that vibe with you and vice versa. And when will this be like a symbiotic moment where it's like we kiki, you find your people and then you get to thrive together. And I feel like hearing you talk about that is a very different way than like, cool, I see the ways in which I can make money and I'll tolerate the ways in which you exist.
That's real. I was talking to my sister about that the other day in terms of like trying to understand, you know, the business aspect of like who actually will make money and am I okay with working with someone who I'm not as excited about because they can make money. And she made comments like, you kind of have to, you know, like there are going to be some people who like, you might not even think that they're the best actor, but there are certain types that just book. You know, I turned down one girl who was, I felt bad. She had her voice is just so irritating to me. She talked like she was like a baby. She had this really like whiny baby voice. She sent me this reel that was just like, it looked like it was like in her bathroom, just like really bad. But homegirl got recurring, right?
Wow.
And now she's with one of the top agencies out there. And it's like, what do you do in that case? Like, but she was beautiful, right? She was beautiful. She was stunning. She was a great quote unquote type. So it's also just like, how do you handle that when someone's like very developmental, like literally like acting one-on-one, but just like stunning, right? So like, am I just gonna work with a couple of models who are not good, but you know, so just like that's a part of the industry too. Like I also want to always have people that I'm excited about. I'm excited about their talent. But there is a side of the industry that like, and happened with me a couple of times that I like turned out someone, now they're in this series, like, and these are people who are very raw, you know? But it's just like, I guess acting also is also kind of very finical. Like sometimes when things are made for you, they're made for you, whether or not you're the best actor or not. I know one young man who like no credits at all is now in one of the basketball shows. And he just, cause he's a tall man, but they need basketball players. Now he does great recurring, right? So this industry is very random sometimes.
Literally. And I think that's what's so hard too, right? You can know what you're worth and you could have that sense of self and you could have your materials. And even then you might not find your reps that you think quote unquote deserve or whatever that is, or the part that you think is your part. You know, there really is no rhyme or reason for so much of it. And I think that is what can be very infuriating for many. And, you know, the ups and downs of all of that, of writing, the fact it's like, well, I've done all this work or I've prepared myself in this way and it's still not opening these doors or getting me these things. But I think also just remembering that everyone is going through that. Like, it's not just this own isolated bubble that you're like, it's only me. No. It's like
so
everyone. Yeah. Well, I'm curious for the people that you have currently on your roster. Obviously, maybe you do have one or two of those people that you're like, you're a moneymaker and I tolerate this. But for the ones that you have that you're really stoked about, what right now would you say, I mean, you don't have to get into specifics necessarily, but like, what are some of those moments for you that you're like, I'm feeling the momentum with this, or this is getting me really excited seeing this client in development? And now, like, what has been that journey?
Yeah, I think the best thing is just seeing folks who are just kind of making like the small wins, like they're getting a co-star here, recurring here, and just seeing that like gradual build, you know, because I think sometimes people have this thing about like, they want that big role that's going to change their life, that series regular. But I don't know, sometimes it's also the small wins that you like appreciate more. You know what I mean? Even if it's something like a small recurring, but it is something that like, hey, remember when we had like no credits at all? Remember when it was just theater? But now you have like 4 nice credits on like various networks and these cast members love your work. So I also liked, you know, I also just always like the journey. You know, I love the journey of the working with these artists who are more developmental and just kind of seeing them grow. Because sometimes it's also about like, okay, of course, you know, we all want to make money, right? Pay the bills, but it's kind of worthwhile when you're also seeing, you know, how they started with like very few credits and now they have this amazing reel. Like when I made one of my clients reel, I'm like, oh my God, remember we just had self-tapes? How was your reel? Your reel was a whole self-tape of reel, but now you have all these beautiful credits. So I really like that part. That part of the journey is really nice.
Amazing. May I ask how many clients? I mean, obviously you said you started with a few, but like from the start of 20, I guess it's 2020. It's wild also that let's talk about that in a second. Let's put a pin in that you started this in COVID, but from the start of the 2020 moment until now, how many clients did you have and how many do you have now?
I think I started off with a lot of clients. I think I shouldn't have done that. I think I probably should have worked off my way small, but I don't know. I think there's something about like, I felt the need to acquire more folks because it's like starting the company, I need to get, you know, start making money. So I think I started off with about like 20 or 22 clients, I believe, at the beginning, which is just like, I don't know what I was thinking. I should start off with like 10. I have one friend who literally has 10 clients. I'm like, that's my dream.
Yeah. Wow.
They're all like working. They're all successful and they're all working. She has a lot of comedians and stuff like that. But you know, now I have 35 to go from like 2022 and now it's 35. And just like, ooh, this is a big number, you know, but it's so interesting. I have some friends who also have like twice as more than I have, and they're also managers. So it's also just like, oh, there's some managers who also like have a lot of folks, but I guess it kind of just depends, you know?
Yeah. Well, how was it starting right before the pandemic? Because you didn't just start a whole new thing. You started it in the most volatile of times. What was that like?
It was intense. You know, I will say if I can go back, I think I would have waited because it was just like, I don't know why. I just felt kind of like there was kind of like a fire under me because I also had all these clients who were kind of like, you know, even though I'd gotten laid off from the previous job because of COVID, but there was all these clients who kind of like, where are you going? Let me know where you go. So it's almost like I felt the pressure because like I wanted to hold on these clients, you know, because I knew that they were, you know, they either were let go from the other company or they didn't necessarily want to go to like stay with the other company. So I felt that pressure kind of like, oh, let me get together. I want to keep my clients. I want to get more clients. Or the people who also I was talking to before the pandemic that I really wanted to work with, you know. So I just kind of felt that need to kind of start so I don't like lose a handful of people that I wanted to work with. But it definitely was slow. Like it was kind of scary. Like luckily I had gotten a grant from American Express, and then I also did a really great fundraising campaign. So I raised a lot of capital. So that was like, you know, good to start. But at the end of the day, I'm like, I still got to make money, you know? So it did take a while for us to really start to make money. You know, it's still kind of steady right now, but the goal is to really, you know, have a lot more folks who are kind of booking more work consistently. But during COVID, it was kind of like, oh my God, where are the auditions? What's happening? But now I'm like nonstop auditions. And now I'm just like, oh, I have to hire interns now because like it's a lot of auditions are coming in, which is really good.
Yes.
So,
do you feel like most of your clients are venturing into TV and film land? Do you feel like you kind of acquire them when that is their main focus? Do you like to split their time? Is it more of a conversation to see what they are interested in? What is the TV film / theater
Well, most
balance?
of my clients honestly were mainly like theater, you know, because of COVID, a lot of them have transitioned to television and film. So the folks who normally had gotten music theater or gotten, you know, were mostly getting theater bookings. Now they've been getting like some guest stars, some recurring, some co-star bookings here and there. I also had a young man who like tested for a pilot, and he found some musical theater, you know. So with that said, they do everything, you know. Everyone's different. I do have some clients who are not as focused with theater. They want to focus on camera. But again, I think everyone's kind of different, but I do try to submit folks for everything if they can. I love theater. So I also tell folks like theater is also a good way to get more television and film cast members familiar with their work. If you get to the show in New York, I can also get an opportunity to also invite the film television cast members to come see their work. So I definitely always encourage them to do theater if they can, especially in New York.
Yeah. In terms of people, when they submit themselves to you in your office, what do you like to see? What do you like an email to say? What do you like the submissions to include or not?
Yeah. So it's so funny. In my class today, they were asking me like, I don't even know what to say in the email. What do I say in my cover letter? I'm like, just keep it sweet. It's like, I think people overthink emails for some reason. I'm not sure what it is. Like, one girl literally gave me like her whole life story. Another girl told me that some director was trying to hit on her. I'm like, people are just doing too much in these emails. Just like do a brief 4 to 6 sentence, who you are, any recent projects, any upcoming projects. Here's my headshot, resume, and reel. Hope you like the work. Like it's just to keep it simple, you know. I get it because we want to be seen, and people do all this like gimmicky things. Like one girl's like, I'm a cross between Jennifer Aniston and, you know, this actress. I'm just like, just be yourself. Who cares who you look like, or who you're across, or what type are you? Just kind of like submit your materials, get straight to the point, because we're also very busy. We're busy, you know, submitting our own clients, pitching. So we don't have time to read long emails. We just want to see your work at the end of the day. You know, people have been getting in this weird, I don't know what it is. Like people have been like, I guess maybe asking if we're like maybe acquiring, like they're asking if you're looking for like new clients before they're submitting the materials. I also just like people to like just send your materials. Like you don't have to kind of do this kind of like back and forth. But I guess sometimes people don't necessarily want to waste their time submitting. But I would just submit your materials and see what happens, you know, as opposed to sending these inquiry emails or sending an email about like, oh, how do I get started in the industry? Or like, just make sure you have your materials and have that headshot, have that resume, have that reel. If you don't have a reel, have maybe like 2 or 3 acting links from auditions. But materials are definitely everything. I think some people don't know that like that's probably one of the most important things when you're submitting to representation. You have to have your materials. You can't submit something and I don't even know if you can act or not. Like headshot and resume is not enough for me personally. Like I need to see, you know, recent auditions. I need to see reels. So just make sure you have that like strong like pitch package together.
Yeah. Do you prefer things sent via, and I guess this is also for auditions, though obviously it depends on the casting director, but do you prefer things, you know, via YouTube, Vimeo, WeTransfer? Do you Google Drive? Like, is there a certain...
I like Drive or Vimeo or Dropbox. I don't know what it is. I don't like to download stuff. I feel like it's annoying when I'm like down, and it also makes me feel like people are spying on me. Cause I know with WeTransfer, you can actually like, you know, people are like downloading. I'm like, can just send me the link whenever you're ready. But yeah, I like to just look at links as opposed to like downloading stuff. And also you don't know if someone's downloading and there's like a virus
Spam.
or something like that. You know what I mean? So you just got to be careful.
Yep.
Download. Yeah.
And also, like, there's only so much room on your computer at this point, and I would imagine with your clients coming in,
I have to clean up my computer soon. It's getting out of control.
For real. No, I have the same thing. I'm like, do I have the space, and do I need to upgrade, and how does this work? When you work with your clients specifically on auditions that come through, are you hand-holdy in terms of the way in which they put themselves on tape, or is it more just like you trust them to do their work, and then if something needs to come back, you are going to be like, hey, can you, if you change this, yada yada yada?
Here's the thing. I try not to. Something weird happened before. Like, I'm very delicate when it comes to giving feedback, if that makes sense. Because this one time I gave feedback and it just was took it the complete wrong way, you know. And I gave feedback in a way that was trying to help elevate my client. Next thing I know, I got dropped. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the sad part is, I'm gonna bring this up. It's funny because I just got a text message from the person that dropped me. We're still friends to this day. Yeah. Because eventually when you rep your clients, they become your friends and they become your family. Yeah. But there was a situation that he was auditioning for a musical. It's dancing. Yeah. This is a client who did not do musical theater, who never did Broadway before, but agents who are thinking about, oh, he fits a quote unquote type. And not really about like, how does this actually best showcase what my client can do? They get caught up in like submitting them for the box. Yeah. As opposed to like, what can our client actually do? Is this actually going to be good branding? And the ironic part is like, the client can't dance. And I'm just like, hold on, what's happening here? And then his agent, it's weird because he's almost like sometimes there's like a bad cop, good cop. This is an example of like, when we're not on the same page with agents, and you definitely will also want to be on the same page with agents. And now I actually learned, this is like years ago at an old management company I was with. Now, if I'm having a conversation with the agent, I take off the client because not really about us going back and forth. I think the thing that had got me into trouble, I was going back and forth and the client was on the emails and the client didn't appreciate it. So it's also about like, let's touch base as agent and manager and like talk about what we're doing as opposed to getting the client a vibe and feeling like your parents are arguing. Yeah.
Yeah.
But with that said, you know, it's a funny thing is that like I got dropped, but it's also like you never did get that call back.
Yeah.
Because I was right, you know. But some people, when you give them feedback, it's like, oh, well, you know, you don't believe in me. I'm like, no, like I believe in you, but I know what you can do. Like I know you, I know what you can do, I know what your goals are, and I was not on the vision board.
Yeah.
Let's get you into something else that makes sense, you know?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I feel like there was a situation that like, you know, I do get feedback, but you know, certain people I'm noticing are a little bit more delicate than others, you know. There are certain clients that I know that like, I can actually give them like real talk, ChiChi talk. Hey, that's not going to cut it. We need another take. And other clients are just like, what were your choices during that moment? You know what I mean? Like, as opposed to like, I need you to redo it. But I talk about choices, like what we were thinking about, you know? So the good thing about this time is that like, I get to see every single tape. Back in the day, I feel like I didn't know how people auditioned in the room. You know, I didn't know why, so-and-so's auditioning a lot. Like, why aren't they getting the callbacks? But now I know exactly why they're not getting the callbacks, you know? So now I can actually pinpoint like, hey, we need a class. Yeah. Like we need a class. You're going in a lot. Nothing's happening. We got to clean some things up because I can see all the tapes coming in. So I do watch every single tape that comes in. I give feedback. Depending on who the client is, I can be delicate. Other times I'm just like a little bit more like, we got to redo this whole thing. It's not acceptable, you know? Because sometimes I'll have clients that will be like, they kind of have their own connections and they'll like, maybe they're able to get an appointment because they went through the other connection. But here's the thing. You also got to make sure that like, we're on the same page because like there's a situation that like someone got in for a big project, Broadway, they had their own connections, but then it's also just like, cast member just like, she's not right, you know, or she needs a class, right? So like, remember that time that like, I told you need to find a teacher. We need to work on this before we're submitting for one of the top casting directors in New York, right? So it's really important that you're on the same page with your rep, with your team. But I get it in terms of the antsiness, like I just want to be seen and I think I'm great, but like you weren't ready. So now you got to wait a little bit longer because you weren't ready and you went too fast.
Yeah.
So,
are there certain classes that you always recommend to people, or is it more like, hey, wherever you're at, I think this one might be more specific? Are there certain
it just depends. Like like I love Heidi Marshall, Bob Krakauer is really good, Terry Knickerbocker Studios. I have a good friend who teaches at Maggie Flanagan. So I usually kind of refer folks that I usually know, or I also have a lot of friends who are really dope private coaches. Like there are also other actors who who are like the kings and queens of booking. Like they just book nonstop, whether recurring guest stars, series regulars, and they're just really good at just providing audition tips. So I also refer them to my clients as well. And then of course I have like my list of like local teachers, and even with dialect, I just have some clients who are international. So I also have them meet with some dialect coaches for the American accent. So yeah, I try to provide as many resources as I can for my clients, because it's important to just set them up for success, because it's not only about you getting an audition, but like now what, you got to prepare, you got to find a coach, you got to make sure that you're doing your scene study work. I've been noticing that with some folks, now that they have so much time to do their own self tapes, there's a lot of kind of like waiting last minute, or like if there's not a lot of prep time, I guess, because it's kind of like you can do whenever you want. But now I'm encouraging people to like really work on the scenes early, because you can send me the video ahead of time and I can have more time to send you notes. Or sometimes I'll submit a client earlier than expected, and casting will be like, oh, we really like them, but can they retape this scene? So like I always tell people, like, don't try to wait last minute for some of these appointments. Try to see if you can really work on it from the beginning, get it in where you can, because you just never know when you need to kind of redo some things.
Yeah. You had also touched on, the fact that you were dropped by a client. And I think so often as actors or artists, we forget that it is a two-way street, that as you mentioned, it's a relationship like anything. And I think, so often many folks put reps on a pedestal of like, well, they're going to provide the opportunities and therefore but it's this symbiotic moment. Like you make money, they make money. Like, you know what I mean? Like we want to be working together, and how, even though you might feel like, oh, my reps are going to drop me, it could be the other way around too. I would imagine. I imagine that also can hurt at some points when you're like, oh, I've developed you and I've really worked with you and I love working with you, and I get it, you're now heading in a different direction. And also,
and it's also, the thing is, it's a two-way street with the relationship. Like the same way that, agents and managers can drop the clients, clients can drop us as well, so we're all human. Sometimes you also outgrow people, the thing that I'm realizing now, that like there may be a time, like even though I do the most. I had one client who I, no longer, we kind of like parted ways. And in my mind, like, oh, I thought I did all the things that you want me to do. I got you this guest star, I got you this, you came from this. And sometimes people are just not satisfied, in their mind, they think that they can find someone who can do more. But the irony is that like, sometimes it's like, you just have to be patient. Sometimes it's not about you finding the other agent, the other manager, but it's really about like, sometimes it's going to happen fast for you. Sometimes it's not. It's really about like really making sure that you're also, doing what you need to do as an actor, as opposed to like kind of pointing fingers at like, well, they could be doing more. Right. And sometimes it's just like, I have to let that go. I think when I was working at another company, I would take it very like personally, because I'm just like, oh my God, I worked so hard, long hours. I thought I did everything right. And like, they're still going to drop us, But that's just what it is. Sometimes people feel like, okay, I've arrived, I'm a series regular, therefore I need to get a whole new team, right? Because I've upgraded. But ironically, sometimes when you upgrade, you may find yourself out of work for 2 or 3 years. I remember seeing a video with an African who the actor was. He had booked all these major films, got a whole new fancy team, and then he didn't work for 2.5 years. He almost quit acting.
Wow.
Didn't book a single job. So you just never know. Sometimes you think that you're trying to like upgrade your reps, but you just never know what the timing is, So I personally think it's good to also work with folks who who have been very loyal and working hard towards you. Like if you're getting work with these teams, like I also feel like, what's the purpose of going to another team? Because in your mind you think like the people in Hollywood are with these 4 top agencies, but not everyone's doing well at the 4 top agencies. Not every career is the same. There's only a small percentage of people who are like celebrities and like consistently working actors. But I do think it's always good to have those strong people who are behind you from the beginning, as opposed to now that you can make a lot of money, we like you. But before, we're going to ignore your phone calls. You know what I mean? So,
it's like big fish, small pond, or whatever that phrasing is of, how do you want that relationship to be set up? Do you want the fancy label and you might not be the top dog in that? Or do you want to potentially be said, quote unquote, top dog in a smaller space where somebody's like, I'm focusing on you and I'm focusing on your goals, and wherever it is that you want, I'm supporting and lifting up. I guess it's not a one size fits all. I also wonder, I mean, you mentioned this a bit too, I think there is a misnomer about, well, once I get reps, my job as an actor stops in terms of what I'm doing on my own to hustle and to get into rooms and cultivate these relationships. What do you feel, and I tread this word lightly, but like is an actor's responsibility while still being with representation?
Yeah, well, I just feel like, at the end of the day, like me as a manager, I get 10%, the agent gets 10%. So I do feel like you still got to continue the work. Like you can't think that because I have a team, I can just relax and wait for you to get me appointments. Like, no, you should still either be in class, you should still be doing your research. It's so funny when I ask a client, oh, what are you watching? Oh, I'm not really watching TV. I'm like, homie, you better watch that damn, Black Mirror episode. Black Mirror is coming back. Watch Abbott Elementary. Watch Everything's Trash. Like that is literally your homework. Watch television. How are you gonna know these shows that you want auditions for if you're not watching them? So I do feel like you should always be studying. You should always be knowing. You should be reading Deadline, Hollywood Reporter, Playbill.com. Like for folks to be like, oh, what's happening right now? I'm like, read Playbill.com. There's a lot of things happening right now. There's a lot of things happening in the entertainment industry. I love it when my clients will literally send me a list. These are all the projects I found out about. I think I'd be right for these 4. So on the back of my mind, I'm just like, okay, I got to track these projects as opposed to kind of like waiting for like the breakdowns. I'm kind of always like on the hunt for projects, and clients will send me emails about like, oh, they just saw that a casting announcement, or they just saw that this is being developed. So I like when folks are actually like reading and letting me know like what you're excited about. So yeah, okay, I know you're excited about this project. Okay, we got to make sure we got to get an appointment. If I can't get the appointment, I'll communicate with the agent, checking in to see if they did a push for it. So it's really about just kind of also doing that work and just knowing what's out there as well, and not just like, waiting on us. I think it's important.
Yeah. Do you find that sometimes there are, though, when people send the list of like, I love these things, and then there isn't the ability to get in for that there is like a level of resentment when it doesn't happen?
A little bit, yeah. I can see that, and the sad part is even when I give them feedback, it's like, it's not good enough. They'll be like, because I'd be like, the part's already cast, like, well, how come I didn't get it? I'm like, because they
straight offered, yeah.
Straight offered, or the writer, like I remember I was trying to pitch my client, and Cash was like, yeah, we're not really bringing, like, it's literally like we're only bringing a small number that the director wants us to bring in, they weren't, so that's like the feedback I get sometimes. And sometimes even when you're perfect for it, sometimes there's nothing we can do. We still can't get the appointment, which is why it's also always important for you to also put yourself out there. You can also be networking, meeting cast members on your own. Not saying you have to do the pay to play workshops, but if there is a cast member, let's say for HBO, that's doing an on-camera class, see if you can do the on-camera class, because either way you're brushing up your on-camera technique anyway, but like it's another opportunity for you to also meet people. There's a ton of festivals that also happening in New York. I went to some events at the Tribeca Film Festival, and I met so many producers and directors, and so many industry people were there, and folks said like, apparently like there are people who like follow me on Facebook. I don't know who followed me on Facebook, So like I made new connections, people who like knew me from the social media, You just never know also who's already following you. So like you as an artist can also be out there going to events, networking. I know it's kind of weird because it's still COVID time, but there's still ways for you to also like get yourself out there, have a business card or have a great social media page where you can also invite people to, get to know you, take a look at your work. But there's another way for you to also kind of continue to be proactive and not kind of like, how come it's so slow? What's going on? Like, girl, take a class. Slow. Go to Pilates. I always tell people like, find a hobby. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah, very much so.
Slow for you. It's like, why is it should not be slow? Keep yourself busy. Keep yourself busy in the meantime.
I love that. Are there certain, obviously there's many a site, but do you feel that it's an obligation for our actor to have, an actor's access, a backstage, a playbill, a casting networks? Like, do you feel like you need all of it? Do you feel like some of them are most important? Which one are you like, this is a non-negotiable?
It just depends. I feel like with most agents and managers, we have, breakdown. So actors, you have to have actors access because it's connected to breakdown. And then they usually have like casting networks. There's a whole bunch of other things like backstage. But the ones that they definitely need to have is actors access and casting networks because of auditions. Casting networks is mainly, I would say, commercials and stuff and print. But either way, I think those two are the main ones. But I don't think it could hurt to have backstage as well. But if you're like not represented, I know backstage is really good for people who are not represented. Or even Playbill.com. I feel like Playbill.com has like some of the same things that are on backstage. So
for sure.
There are also a lot of people who are doing a lot of general submissions and they accept tapes. And I have a lot of friends who had actually gotten like callbacks and got cast from things they saw on like Playbill or backstage from self-submissions. Sometimes people actually, when they have an agent, they'll self-submit themselves and they can actually get their appointment before their agent can. So that happens quite a few times,
That's happened to me very recently, actually.
Yeah.
Yep.
No disrespect. Like, we still love y'all.
Yeah. It's kind of like, I did this. And then, you got the appointment? Yeah, because I literally already sent in a tape.
Yeah. It's like a gulp. I guess we should have been on it.
Yep.
You know, so that happens too. Sometimes we miss things, you know,
yeah.
sometimes we miss, like, I try to be on top of it, but just like, oh, damn, I should have followed up, you know, because that happens too. About you submit, you call, but there are times when like there's like a waiting game for certain roles, or maybe these castings waiting to hear back. I had a client who was like on hold for a project, and we thought it went to another actor, and then like 3 weeks later, it's like, oh, the other actor turned it down, and like it went to my client, you know. So with that said, there's just different time periods, you know, but it's also always good to, like, for us to know that we still have to follow up on certain things. Because sometimes I do feel like, oh, I dropped the ball on a couple of things, like, oh, whoops, I gotta stay on top of that, you know.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned social media. How much do you feel? How important is it? Is really the first part. How important is it to put, you know, the things that you do as an actor on there? How important is it to use it as a tool for networking? Just the important ratings of, like, in terms of the way in which you found it to be successful, helpful, or not.
It just depends, you know. I've been seeing some things about folks asking for followers, and, you know, it is what it is in terms of, like, I do know there are like social media stars and people who are famous on TikTok and YouTube and Instagram and whatnot. They're all like influencers, but in terms of like the working artists, you just have to be intentional. I don't think you have to post for sake of posting, you know. I think the same way that you're telling stories through your acting reel and your headshot and all these other marketing materials, you should be telling a story, you know, your Instagram, you know. So I do tell folks, like, when you are posting, make sure that you're also paying attention to the content. Are you posting a video? Because I've been noticing videos are getting very popular on like Instagram in particular because of TikTok, I think.
Yeah.
But it's almost like you'll get more traction with certain videos more so than even your pictures, you know? So even just knowing, like, understanding how hashtag works, understanding how tags work, and just making sure that you're also like doing the, there's a whole like algorithm in terms of certain days during the week or like more busier than others, certain times. So it's just a strange thing in terms of like, even just meeting with someone who's also like a consultant. You don't have to do it like in the early phase of your career, but as like, let's say you're hiring a publicist, or let's say you're building momentum on Broadway or doing a tour, or I don't know, doing a television show, you may want to work with even a consultant to kind of like coach you on some things, because I do think there's actually a way to actually increase your followers on social media. And I think it's always good to, you know, I actually like when people have like, you know, they have a huge presence. There's a couple of clients that I had them just like, how do you get 20,000 followers? And like, how long have you been on social media?
Yeah.
But they just know, they know how to work the algorithms, and they just know how to like post very interesting, compelling content. They also have a lot of engagement. Because sometimes you see people who have a lot of followers, but they don't really have a lot of engagement. Like, oh, that's actually like a fake thing. Like, you either bought your followers, or it's just like you're not even posting things that people are even liking or commenting on. But there's some folks I know that, like, you know, they have a lot of followers, but they also have people who are like commenting a lot. They're getting like circulation and stuff. So I do think it's important. I do like it when people like pay attention in terms of like what they post, what the pictures that they're posting, the videos, and just make sure it's also helping to elevate you. Like, I also feel like with Instagram also became popular because of celebrities, because like we just want to know like what Beyonce was eating. You know what I mean? You know, we wanted to see like Rihanna with her boyfriend, you know? So I think it was our way to like, outside of people's talent, we really actually just kind of want to get inside of their life. So I also tell folks, like, feel free to also like post things about you as a human, because sometimes I actually, when someone will submit to me, I honestly will look on social media and be like, oh, let me get a feel of their energy, let me get a feel of their vibe. There's a couple of people that I'm just like, some of their Instagram was kind of suspect. I was like, yeah, because even when you're on the fence, when you see the Instagram, like, not my vibe, you know, not my vibe. You can really get a feel of people's like personality and like by the content that they post. You know? So I do think it's important to think about like branding, and, you know, everything you also put out there, it kind of stays in social media land. Even when you try to delete it, apparently things will say, like, especially with Twitter, you delete things and things will come up 10, 15 years. So it's also about like, are you going to be someone who's going to be like controversial, or are you posting things that are going to hurt your career? Because a lot of people are also getting fired because of things that they post on social media. So I do think it's important to really think about how you're branding yourself, what you're putting out there, and engaging people in some way. So I do talk to my clients about social media a lot. We actually had like a social media consultant talk to my clients. We had like a Zoom class. She just talked about all the ways you can kind of like help with social media, because a lot of them don't really like Twitter for some reason, but she's made a comment how Twitter is actually really important, because it's also about like targeting certain demographics and certain audiences So there's certain audiences that you'll reach with Twitter that maybe aren't on Instagram. So yeah.
Interesting. That's cool that you provide that for your clients. I feel like what a helpful, also because you're giving, everybody's having the same understanding of where you're coming from, therefore. And so you don't have to have the same conversation 17 times or 30 something times with your clients.
Yeah. It's also like, I told you so, basically.
Exactly. Yeah. You're like, you didn't hear it from me, but you heard it from them and now you're listening. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Understood. What about like a personal website? Do you feel like there are certain things that must live on that? Do you feel like it can be as much as just a landing page? Here's your headshot. Here's a little resume, click and contact me here. What about that?
I love the resumes. I feel like the resumes is like, it's like kind of like a one place I can go to see all your materials. Like I'd much rather click on a resume than like click on like 8 different links that you're sending me. You know what I mean? Like not your resume, sorry, your website. Because you can go on your website, I can find your resume on your website, I can find your pictures, I can find your reels, I can find your contact information. So, and then with the bio, and you get to see also other pictures that people may have outside of their headshot. So you actually get to see what people actually look like on their website. So I've always been a big fan of websites. Because I do feel like, see if you're submitting to representation, I think sometimes we just need more. We want footage. We want to know if people are actually like putting certain materials together. And also like, it shows me that you're also doing the work. Yeah. You know, I had one young girl, like when I first started my company, she had this like, all her materials just on point. Like she didn't even graduate school yet. Wow. She had her website was really fancy that I think she did herself. She had all these reels that she did because she had like, a friend that was a filmmaker. I was just so impressed by like the work that she's done, you know, before she even graduated. So I was like, oh, if she's gonna work like this, like, oh, she's gonna work hard as an actor, as my client, you know? Yeah. So sometimes there's something about like the way that you put your package together that I'll know, you know, how you're also gonna like approach your acting work, you know, how you're gonna approach, you know, auditions that I send you. Cause sometimes some people will be excited about, you know, getting these auditions, but you'd be surprised how many people turn down, you know, serious regular roles or turn down recurring roles or like something came up, you know, but sometimes I think like some people just don't want to do the work. It's like, okay, I'm busy doing other stuff. And maybe in their mind, they think like it's probably a long shot, but you just never know when the project that you're about to turn down, like that could actually be your shot. You know, my sister made a comment about, she actually like tried to turn down, she's a series regular on this new show. And she had turned down the audition twice because she was so busy. She's busy. Wow. And it wasn't until like her agent like literally begged her to audition and she like kept on getting callbacks. She tested and now she's making a lot of money. She's involved living her best life.
Yes.
Like, you never know. You never know.
Do you feel like there's anything that we did not touch upon, or is there anything that's like on your heart right now that you feel it's important for young artists to hear that we just have not spoken about yet?
I would just tell folks about like, just take your power back. You know, there's something about like I don't know. It's almost like they're always thinking about agent manager, but like, I get it. I get that it's going to be necessary to grow, but sometimes just like get your house in order, you know, before you invite people to your house, clean it. Like make sure your materials are where it needs to be. Like you'd be surprised how people send me materials and just like trying to get an agent manager. It's like, you only have one credit. An agent manager, one credit. Because I think we also live in the world that like people are, you know, they're these digital stars who don't have any credits, but like that's a very small percentage of people who are also working with no credits. Please still try to build your credits, still audition, still get some student films or independent films or theater projects. Like it's not easy. Yeah. Like I actually don't even know. Do you want to be with an agent manager who's going to rep you with one credit? Is that the best you can do? You know what I mean? Because even now, like I actually submitted some of my clients to a few agencies, and some agencies like they just need a bit more credits. You know, they're still developmental clients. You know, so I just want folks to kind of take ownership and like really like do the work. You know, work on being the best actor they can be. You know, build the resume and not get so caught up with like I need an agent manager now. I'm like, we'll come to you eventually. Literally, like we see shows, we see plays, you know, a lot of different showcases. The right person actually will find you. When you're putting yourself out there, you know. I have a lot of friends who like did these kind of like web series with like their community, and like they got like representation through like, you know, agents looking on YouTube for like comedians. So you'd be surprised. But I feel like if you can really focus on the work, I'm not get so caught up like I need an agent now, you know, or I need a manager now. You know. Yeah,
it's a lot about trusting the process and trusting your process and recognizing that there isn't a one size fits all. And also
don't give us all the power. Like don't give us all the power. You can actually do it, and you can actually do it on your own for now.
Yeah. This has been so wonderful, and I'm so grateful for your time. I'm also so grateful for the way in which you're just so honest and real about it all, and also from like a vulnerable place of sharing your own personal experience with your own clients and your business. And so thank you for being so open and available in that way, and again for being such an incredible resource and providing to the community at large so that it supports the community at large. I really think that's just such a wonderful gift that you're giving everybody. So thank you.
I appreciate it.
Yeah. For anybody who is listening who wants to follow along on your journey or to get these said resources that I keep referring to or to see these things, what are some of the best ways within your own boundaries, respectfully, for people to reach out and contact and follow?
Yeah, I'm pretty accessible on social media. I would just say if you're submitting any materials, they can go to my website, www.chitalentmanagement.com, and they can submit inquiries there. But if you want to follow me, follow what I'm doing, my handle for my personal email, not my personal email, my personal Instagram is ChiChi Manager 2020. And then my business Instagram page is Chi Talent Management at Chi Talent Management. So yeah, I'm on all those socials, socials. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much for being here.
Cool. Thanks for having me. It was fun. Yay.
Yes.